Hello, and welcome back to the Nonprofit Spotlight, where we elevate and highlight amazing nonprofit organizations and their leaders in around our neighborhood. Today, we are discussing food and hunger with the Arlington Food Assistance Center, other known as AFAC. Hunger doesn't always look like an empty fridge. Sometimes it looks like a parent skipping meals so that their kids can eat. Sometimes it looks like a senior choosing medication over groceries. Sometimes it looks like working family doing whatever's there can to do everything right, but still falling short. In Arlington, more than 4,200 families every single week rely on an organization to help fill the gaps. Today's episode is about the Arlington Food Assistance Center and what it really means to fight hunger one family at a time. This isn't just a story about food. It's about dignity. It's about stability. It's about how access to groceries can keep families housed, workers employed, and kids ready to learn, and communities strong. We'll talk about why hunger exists even in affluent communities, how neighbors are stepping up with time, food, and dollars, and what happens when assistance is offered not as charity, but as care. Stay with us because the solution to hunger might be closer and more collective than you think. And I'm excited to introduce Charles, the Executive Director of the Arlington Food Assistance, to be with us today. Welcome, Charles, to the podcast. So glad you're here.
Thank you very much. Glad to speak about this subject.
Great. Could you tell us a little bit about how the Arlington Food Assistance Center came into being, or what was the genesis of that project?
Sure. Back in 1988, almost 38 years ago, a number of volunteers got together and wanted to address food insecurity in the Arlington community. At that time, there was a large influx of Vietnamese families into Arlington, into Clarendon. And a number of volunteers got together and figured that they could help. And they founded the Arlington Food Assistance Center. We call it AFAC for short. Not AFLAC. They have a talking duck. We have a talking tomato.
Excellent.
Anyway, so very shortly after they founded AFAC, 6 congregations came to us and said, listen, why don't we get together? We'll send you our volunteers and our food and our support. And that started AFAC. And that decision by those congregations did something very unusual. They gathered together to form an organization that could address food insecurity throughout Arlington County, not just with small congregations here or there, or community centers. So ever since, for the last 30 some odd years, those 6 congregations have been volunteering and supervising our Saturday morning distributions. That's where we started. We've grown tremendously. We've moved to different locations, from a church basement to an old motorcycle repair shop on 10th Street and Washington Boulevard. And then in 1996, we were able to lease the building we're in, which we then purchased in 2008. We have paid off that mortgage. The building has been renovated, and we've been able to buy the building next door. So we have about 15,000 square feet, out of which we do serve 4,200 families each week. So that's really what we do. We serve about half of those families here at South Nelson Street in Arlington, and the other half are served out of 21 other distribution sites around the county.
Wow.
We also have a home delivery system for those individuals who cannot leave their houses and do not have a support network around them. We started this during COVID, but it has continued to address basically elderly families in need.
So 4,200 families is a lot of families in Arlington County. How does that logistically play out, or what does that look like on a weekly basis? How do you move all that food, and what does the operations kind of look like?
100,000 pounds of food comes in and goes out of this facility every week. How do we process it? Let me go back for a second. Our volunteers do an amazing job for us. And as I said, we were founded by volunteers 30 some odd years ago. I came here 18 years ago as the executive director. We were serving about 700 families, but it's really a logistical operation here. Our drivers go out first thing in the morning to pick up donated food from grocery stores, and they come back here. That is then sorted by our volunteers, and then it goes out onto our distribution lines for our families. So it is really a tremendous logistical issue. Yes, we get about 1.5 million pounds of donated food from grocery stores and individual food drives, but we also purchase another 3.5 million pounds of food ourselves. Unlike most food pantries in the United States, which really only deal with maybe 25, 50, maybe more families, most of those food pantries will serve their families once a month. And sometimes that's even limited. That's a limited number of times for the whole year. AFAC is trying to address something very different. We're trying to address long-term food insecurity. Basically, if you don't have food today, you probably will not have food tomorrow
Hmm.
or the next day or the next week. Much of what food pantries do in the United States is really address just emergency food needs. This is a long-term problem. It's a long-term problem actually in one of the wealthiest counties in the nation.
Yeah.
But we have registered with us nearly 24,000 individuals right here in Arlington.
Yeah.
That's nearly 10% of the county's population that we're serving.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, what do people get wrong about food insecurity in Arlington? What do you think their misperceptions are, or how could you give us a greater insight of what the real situation is on the ground?
Well, when I first got here, it was fairly clear that our families wanted to live in Arlington because of the very fine school system. APS is a great school system. And immigrants understand that to get out of poverty, you need education. And that's why they were willing to pay the extra amount of money it takes to live in Arlington County. This is an extremely expensive county, but they were willing to do that. And for all of the other social safety net benefits they could take advantage of.
Yeah.
That has unfortunately changed as inflation has hit our families, both in terms of food prices, but also in terms of housing. The average one-bedroom apartment here in Arlington County is going for something on the order of $2,300 a month. The minimum wage still remains $7.25. If you do the homework, if you do the calculation, an individual would have to work 55 hours a week just to pay for housing. This is why we're doing what we're doing, is that we can provide food that helps families spend their money differently, to focus on those things that are frankly really important in their lives and may in fact get them kicked out of their residency.
Hmm.
So we're trying to help in that way. The other problem that we're facing here in Arlington County right now is that housing prices are going up and our families really can't afford that. So we're seeing a slow migration of low-income families out of Arlington County
Hmm.
into less expensive sites. But the problem there is then you incur a whole bunch of other expenses, transportation expenses, gas, insurance for your cars, and there are not as many organizations like AFAC out in a much larger county like Fairfax.
Yeah.
So that's the situation we're facing. It's a slow migration of folks outside of Arlington. And those that are in Arlington, that's what people don't understand, is that need doesn't care about your living situation. We essentially serve three populations here. The first are the elderly on fixed incomes. Their situation is not going to change, so they will be with us until something changes for them.
Yeah.
Then we deal with the disabled folks, mostly on Social Security disability insurance. Their situation is similar. It is not going to change until they either leave the county or pass on.
Yeah.
The third group, and the largest group, are the working poor, people who do have jobs. And I think that's one of the biggest fallacies, is that these are people without jobs. They're just taking advantage. That's a huge fallacy. Our families are working families.
Yeah.
Many of them have a second job. Some have a third job. And oftentimes, both parents are working. So, these are hardworking folks that we're trying to address. And we're trying to address it on the basis of long-term food insecurity. We
Yeah.
have families that have been with us since 1995.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a long
they're
time.
elderly, right?
So you talked a little bit about what makes AFAC different than some other food pantries or other organizations. And one of the highlights that I've read on based on your website is something called a dignified access to food. Can you say a little bit about what that means for AFAC as an organization and how that's built into the experience of supporting those families?
Sure. Dignity is first and foremost. No one wants to go to a food bank or a food pantry to get their food. They want to go to their own grocery store, spend their own money to purchase food that they and their families will eat and enjoy. We try to do a similar thing here. We provide a choice. We don't pack a box or a bag and say, here, this is what we got. You can take that. We allow our families to pick and choose the foods that they like.
Mhm.
Now, those foods are those high cost items in a grocery basket that are essential for a healthy, nutritious diet. And that's where we can help our families. Everyone will get a half gallon of milk, a dozen eggs. Larger families will get a little bit more. They'll get a selection of chicken, fish, hot dogs, or ground beef. They'll get a selection of fruit and vegetables. We always try to have 3 selections of fruit, 3 selections of vegetables. And then we have all sorts of miscellaneous stuff that is frankly donated food from our grocery stores. They actually provide that variety. And we also try to address cultural needs. We know that many of our families, 54% of our families, are Hispanic, mostly from South America, and Central America, and Upper South America, Bolivia, Colombia, Venezuela, Honduras, Ecuador, Costa Rica, etc. They like a bean. Each country seems to like a different bean. So, we have a selection of dry beans. All of the chicken that we serve is halal chicken. It costs a little bit more, but our Muslim families and other families would prefer it. All of the chicken is halal because it's a lot easier. We're a very practical bunch here. It's a lot easier to have all halal chicken and give it to everybody because it's still good for everybody.
Yeah.
And it addresses our Muslim population. And I think that's the kind of dignity that we look to, respecting the folks that come to us. And remember, our volunteers, we are still an organization that is focused on encouraging volunteerism. And our volunteers, as they're handing out food, say hi. They say it with care.
Yeah.
They say it with the loving care that only our volunteers can do.
Great.
So,
Maybe this would be an opportunity for you to share a little bit about your volunteer corps, about how many people are there at any given time or total volunteers, and then maybe some of the responsibilities they have. And if there's somebody listening to the podcast or watching along that lives in the Arlington area or was interested in volunteering, what they might be in store for.
yeah, sure. Well, first of all, we have a volunteer page on our home site, on our website, afac.org. There's a button up top for volunteers, and it goes through everything that we do. And it provides a place where you can apply to volunteer here. Now, our volunteer activities are very simple. If you can lift a 35-pound milk crate of canned food, that's the only requirement. We have upwards of 2,300 volunteers each year. Last year, they gave us 53,000 hours of volunteer time. It's another 24 full-time employees, by the way, and we only have 25. So it doubles our staff. Our volunteers distribute all of our food. They hand the food to our clients. They sort the food. All of that donated food has to come in. We do not give out expired food. So every can has to be looked at, sorted by type, product, and then prepared. The other test that they have is that we buy a lot of our food through national wholesale food suppliers. We buy chicken, for instance, in 40-pound cases. Our volunteers will break that down into 3-pound portions, and then it is fast frozen and then distributed, dated and distributed. We carefully watch, we carefully watch all of the dating on all of our food supplies. And they will sort all of the donated food. We get food like raspberries and strawberries and fruit from grocery stores. So we have really a number of different types of volunteers, but the most important for us are the weekday morning volunteers. When we have our biggest distributions, those are run by volunteers, and they are themselves mostly elderly, mostly retired individuals who want to do something good in the community and want to have a social time doing it and at a place where they can have some fun. And that's one of the other factors about AFAC. We have fun here. Yes, we're serious. We're seriously feeding a lot of folks, but we can do that having some fun, having some laughter. It's a great volunteer opportunity, and it's an easy one. And I don't have to do a security check on your background. Now, we do have court-appointed community service folks, nonviolent crimes, mostly DUIs, or kids from high school smoking too much dope, or whatever. And that's part of our service to this community also. So our volunteers are really the heart and soul of what we do. And in fact, encouraging volunteerism is really our second mission.
That's great. Thinking about the volunteers, but also the families that you've served, in some cases, years, if not over a decade. Is there any that come to mind that really stand out for you as somebody who's truly life has been changed by AFAC's ability to provide them meals on a consistent and weekly basis?
We have lots of stories. Unfortunately, many of our families don't ever leave us. Yeah, we know that. That's why no one is ever removed from our database, because oftentimes they will return to us. Yeah, there are stories out there, but I think what's more important is that we understand that these families are being pushed down constantly. They're not being allowed to rise up economically through our system. You know, people say we're going to solve the housing problem. They say it as though one day they will actually solve it. I can tell you right now, we will never solve food insecurity in this nation until we change our view on many, many subjects. Retirement with dignity, not poverty. We served at the peak of COVID, 2,800 families. We're now serving 4,200.
Wow.
Since January of 2022, food inflation has shot up and has hurt our families in particular.
Yeah, I'd love to hear you just say more about that and maybe some of the other gaps that are in our social safety net programs or other ways that we go about caring for people as a whole. Like that's a long time having people continually served and having the situation and the dynamics working against them even further, especially just as you mentioned, since COVID.
Right. You know, inflation is one thing, but multiply that into every aspect of our lives. You know, car payments have gone up. You know, insurance payments have gone up. Gasoline has gone up. Rent has gone up. Everything has gone up. Yet our families are not getting the kind of regular increases that keep up with inflation that you or I might get. These are folks that, frankly, our society is taking advantage of. They're getting their cheap labor, individuals that really have no ability to complain and no ability to address. They're left to their best means possible. Every time something comes up, it's our families that are being hit by this. COVID is just one example, but that pushed folks down. And every one of these crises that we have through our economy is holding our families down. So you're asking me for a success story. I don't have a success story. Yes, there are individuals who are doing far better and thank us deeply for what we're doing. And it is changing their lives, but it's maintaining them.
Yeah. Well, maybe the success story is that your organization, AFAC, and the team that you have are a success story because you've been consistent and meeting those challenges to continually support an increasing amount of families on an annual basis.
Yes. And it's not an easy job. It takes $11 million to run this place next year.
Well, I was going to actually go to there next because as part of this podcast platform, I have the opportunity to talk to lots of different nonprofits, many of which are both federally or locally funded, which in our current context, that funding has been decreased significantly lately. But you all have, I think it's 91% funding by private sources, which is something I haven't seen before. Can you tell me a little bit about how you make that happen and thus how you're able to not be impacted by some of these other local and federal funding programs so that you can have that same consistency?
We get no federal money, so thankfully we haven't been cut. We get no state money. Virginia State traditionally has never really dealt with food insecurity as an issue. We do get, this year, we will get about $1.3 million from Arlington County. That is the only government money, and that amounts to about 8% of what it costs to run AFAC. We have a very strong fundraising team. It provides the lifeblood. And this county is a very generous county. It is a very socially aware county. And thankfully, with a good fundraising operation, that's a diversified operation. We get largest amount of donations are from individuals right here in Arlington County. We get donations from many of the businesses who care, and foundations. A number of foundations have been very supportive of us over the years. And so it's a very diversified fundraising campaign that we have to conduct every single year. And we've been lucky that we've been able to present a balanced budget each year, at least for the last 18 years that I've been here.
That's great. Would you say that there's kind of a family feel to AFAC, especially in the giving community? Like this is something that they see as an important element of their neighborhood and their neighbor's neighborhood, and thus collectively they make that initiative and support together?
I don't know what the reason they do. I do know that the Bible says something about feeding the hungry. What is it, Matthew 25:25, or is it 35:35? I don't know which one that is, but it's there. I suspect that there is something similar in the Jewish Bible. There is certainly an admonition to help the hungry in the Quran. The Bhagavad Gita also states something about feeding those in need. And I think that our community really believes those things. They should. And it is, like I said, a socially aware county. We get donations from Republicans. They're socially aware Republicans. They care. Yeah, they probably are the moderates, but this community cares, and it shows.
That's great.
And we've been lucky.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight that on your website it says that you all had something close to 51,000 volunteer hours in a given year, and that equates to more than 200,000 grocery trips in a single year, which is just a staggering amount of volunteer hours, but also trips to grocery stores to support those families. So how do you continue to grow? What are your plans for growth? Because as it kind of sounds from the way we've been speaking, the trajectory for need is only going to get greater in the near future. Would you agree?
It is. And yeah, I think we're sort of getting to the point here in Arlington County where we have saturated, if you will, the market. So we are looking at expanding the geographic reach of AFAC into nearby areas in the city of Alexandria and in Fairfax County, particularly the Bailey's Crossroads, Culmore, Falls Church, parts of Fairfax. We have a unique way of doing business. I think that we need to continue expanding that as we can. Now, I know we cannot provide all of the food that a family needs in a week. I'd have to be serving twice as much to help everyone with everything. But as I said, we can provide those high-priced items, those high-cost items that are necessary for a healthy diet and nutrition, and that's what we focus on. But yeah, we are looking at expanding our geographic footprint.
That's great. It's amazing. Before we go, I did want to talk a little bit about some of the programs or events that you have. The first one I was thinking about was Empty Bowls. Could you say a little bit more about what that is and its goal?
Yeah. Empty Bowls is very much a community event for us. It's an event where local restaurants provide soup. Local potters have made a lot of bowls for us. And so when you come to Empty Bowls, you'll get a bowl. You can select the bowl out of many that we have, select a soup, and join your friends for a holiday meal before the Super Bowl. And that's Super Bowl, SOUPER, BOWL.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But it's really, it's not a high price event at all. $50 to get in. We have 2 seatings. And it's really a community gathering. Many of our volunteers attend, our staff attends, and it's a gathering where I can report on what we've done over the last year, what they have done, because many of the folks in the room are volunteers, so it's actually what they have done for us, and that is a fun event. We have a golf tournament and we have a spring event where this spring we will be celebrating the work of three of our volunteers, as a matter of fact. A volunteer who is one of our founders, has been with us for those 37 years. Another one is a volunteer who directed an extremely large gift from her family foundation to AFAC. She has been a volunteer for 10 years. She's donated a little bit of money here and there, but then all of a sudden dropped a very large gift on us because of the fun and work that she's been doing here at AFAC. Another is another volunteer who was with us last year at our spring event and had a great time. Shortly thereafter, she got a diagnosis of terminal cancer and passed away. And again, left us a very generous gift. Those are our events. They're focused on volunteers, but they do help raise money.
Yeah. Thinking about your leadership and the consistency of AFAC for so long and the impact it's having on the community, can you think of one policy or system that you think, if it was changed, would reduce the need for food assistance in the long term? Just kind of like from where you sit in your perspective.
A living wage would be the best thing. Pay people what they're worth. Pay people what they contribute to society. Honestly, that'll change. That's probably the one thing that will change their lives. Whether it will happen is a different matter.
Right.
I'm not going to have any hope that will ever change. So we're here. We're serving 4,200 families every single week, and we will continue. Our commitment is to feed everyone who comes to our doors in need.
Yeah. And I maybe wanted to end with that because you did highlight the ways that people could volunteer and make a donation through your website. If there's somebody who's listening that may be in that demographic of looking for some supplemental food support or groceries, how would they get in contact with you all and benefit from your services?
The simplest way is to come here. And what we do when you first come here is we'll provide food. We set up a file in a software package that we have. It's a cloud-based, password-protected software that can be accessed not only here, but by all of the social workers at the Department of Human Services and at Arlington Public Schools, or from almost 30 other nonprofit organizations. What that allows is a referral. We require a referral. That allows you to get food here once a week for 6 months. If you're elderly, you get a 1-year referral because your situation is not going to change, so why put you through all that paperwork for that headache, right? But as long as the social worker believes the family will benefit from our services, they can be referred to us. 9,800 referrals, and about 80% of those referrals came to us last year.
Wow, that's amazing.
8,500 families, unique families, at some point during the year. We provide food, but we also recognize that if you don't have food, you've got other problems too. And by asking a family to go to the Department of Human Services, what we're really doing is getting them into the system, getting their needs evaluated by professionals, and then they can be signed up for whatever benefits they're eligible for. And if you're an Arlington resident, you can be referred to us. After that, you decide whether you're going to come to us or not.
Okay.
And that changes. Sometimes our families will get their SNAP benefits early in the month, and those benefits run out at the end of the month. Towards the last 2 weeks, families will come to us when they might not have come to us in the first 2 weeks. As I said, families want to go to their own grocery stores. So if they have some money in their pocket, maybe they got a day laborer job this week, or the construction site is working this week. A lot of our families have construction jobs. So when it rains or snows, like the last 3 days, they won't have work. So they'll come to us.
Yeah. Well, it's extraordinary what you've accomplished, that you continue to be open like today when logistics are difficult, as you mentioned, because given the snow, but just the consistency and abundance that you provide for the community and the community of support of donations and givers and funding is extraordinary as well. And so On behalf of all of us listening and all those that you're impacting, thank you so much for your time today, but also for you and for all your volunteers and how you make Arlington County a healthier and more well-fed place to live.
It's a big job, but it's a good job.
Well, we're grateful for you. Thank you.
You're welcome.